Welcome back to Appropriations 101. Today we're going to talk about the State and Foreign Ops Appropriation Bill. We have with us the chairman of the State and Foreign Ops Appropriations Subcommittee, Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida. Now you should know that I've got to know him really well. He's from Cuba, so he's a Cuban American. And I will tell you, the people that I have met that are his constituents, Cuban Americans, there is not a more patriotic section of our country than Cuban Americans, because they know what socialism is. They've gone through it. They don't want to see that happen in this country. And so I've been honored to be a good friend of Mario's and the work that he does. State and Foreign Ops Appropriation Bill does exactly what it sounds like, State and Foreign Ops. Mario, what's the challenge in your bill, and what are the things that you're trying to accomplish?
Well, Chairman Simpson, I think that the key part of it is when you think about spending money abroad, we have to make sure that if we're going to do that, that money is well spent. And I don't want to sound crass, but the concept of spending money abroad just because we're nice, if you're flush with money, maybe that's okay. But I think we need to be able to show the American people that the money that we're spending abroad is to help the national security interests of the United States. And you and I have had conversations about this, and of course we've debated this bill as well in committee, subcommittee, and on the floor. And the theme that I think the Republicans believe in, and when it comes to state and foreign operations, is look, if you're an ally of the United States, if you help our interests, well, I think we need to express that, and we need to show that, and we need to try to be helpful. We need to help our allies. But if you're an enemy of the United States, an adversary, or you're in cahoots with our adversaries, we should not only not fund you, which unfortunately we are funding institutions that I think are hurting our national security interests, we should do everything we can to confront you. And so if you're an ally, we should be helpful. If you're an enemy or you're allied to our enemies, we should confront you. And that's what I have tried to do, and what we have tried to do through the appropriations process, the Republicans have tried to do, to change the scope of this bill from just, spending money because we know we kind of want to making sure that money is for the national security interests of the United States, to help our allies, and to confront the enemies of the United States. Period. End of story.
Yeah, it is. Your part of this appropriation overall bill is been reduced substantially.
Yes.
You've taken some of the biggest cuts in your bill, and yet you've come out with a good bill that, as you said, helps our allies, which helps the United States, frankly.
Correct.
And we need to understand that. We don't stand alone on a mountain.
Correct.
But we have allies.
Correct.
And we need to support those allies because we'll need their support at times.
Absolutely, and we do that again to help our national security interests.
Right.
It's not just because we want to be nice.
Yeah.
It's to help our national security interests. And you're absolutely right. Look, there are some other subcommittees where you may be able to, you can be more efficient here and there, but reducing, since we've been reducing, right, the Republicans cut funding, that it gets harder and harder to do because there are some things that we have to do. You have this chart here, right? And if you've got defense, homeland security, military, that's what percentage of
75%.
That's 75%
Of the 23% that's discretionary spending.
That's right, that we deal with in the appropriations committee every year. And so these are things, I would argue that on, frankly, all of those, we need to spend more money.
Yeah.
And there are other subcommittees, that also we need to make sure that we are funding what we need to fund. In state foreign operations, let me tell you what I found when I got that chairmanship, when the Republicans took the House. What I found, and not a surprise, and I've been on the subcommittee, so I knew this, which was helpful when I got the chairmanship, that we have been spending money on institutions and groups that not only are not helping us, by the way, they're not helping our allies either. They're actually using our money to hurt our interests.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example? The UN, and we can spend hours.
Yeah, we can spend hours talking about the UN. And
Right. They have this commission on inquiry on Israel, and all they do is bash and attack Israel. Israel's our best ally. They're at war, and so they were using our money, the UN, to bash our strongest ally. Well, no, I was able to eliminate that funding, not only in the House bill, which with Republican support, but then also in the negotiations where we were able to do that. So I was able to then we ended up with a 6% reduction This is not what we passed out of the House, which was even more dramatic.
Yeah.
After the negotiations, which, you know, whether we like it or not, we gotta negotiate with the Senate.
Yep.
And it requires 60 votes, as you know, Chairman, and we gotta negotiate with the White House. After that, we got a 6% reduction, and I would argue that we're doing more and better with less money. How do we do it? Because in this particular bill, they were misspending and wasting so much money that I was able to reduce spending, cut things that are not helping us, not helping our national security, re-emphasizing helping our allies, confronting our enemies, and do more with less. Not every subcommittee can do that.
Yeah.
But in my case, the waste that was there was so dramatic that it wasn't easy, but we were able to do it.
Well, and that's important. And that's why we have hearings all spring long. We have the agencies come in. That's part of our responsibilities, the oversight hearings that the appropriations subcommittees do. I would guess, I would say it's probably one of the most important things. Because then the agencies out there know that we're actually looking at them and what they're doing. And if they're not doing what we want them to do, I always have a little conflict in my bill with the EPA.
Oh.
It's not that I'm against the EPA, they do some important things.
Right.
But sometimes they get out of their lane
Right.
and try to do way too much. And our job is to bring them back in. Same thing with what you're saying, but there is a great tendency I have found, and I think it's probably human nature, that it's, if you want to make somebody your friend, let's just give them some money and then they'll like us, you know?
That's what
And I think that's gone on way too long in the money that we give to our foreign allies and foes.
Absolutely. And so there are some things that you would think are not that complicated, right? I mean, when we saw what happened in Israel in October, the Israelis and many of us in Congress have been complaining about a UN institution in that part of the world that in essence I think has become almost like an agency of Hamas, right? UNRWA, the UN Work and Relief Agency, that has received U.S. money through the UN, and it's received money from other countries. And these Israelis have been telling us, hey, these guys are bad news. Well, then what happened in October happened, and then they actually had employees of this UN group that actually went into Israel to murder innocent Israelis. And then there was a Hamas tunnel, by the way, Mr. Chairman, underneath the headquarters of this UN institution. There.
Really?
Yes, with the electricity going from the UN building down to the Hamas tunnel. And so I thought, Mr. Chairman, that was going to be an easy thing to eliminate the funding for, right? Because obviously they should not be getting funding. They should have never gotten funding. That was one of the biggest battles that we had with the Democrats, because the administration and the Democrats in the Senate wanted to keep funding to a group that I think has become captured entirely by Hamas. So my question is, if you don't want to cut funding for that, what does it take?
Yeah. What do you want to cut funding for?
Well, the good news, by the way, is that we did finally get that done. I would be remiss though, because you mentioned some of the, these things that we were able to do in state foreign ops and reducing funding for things that are not good and then focusing on the things that are important. I can't tell you, because I haven't been in appropriations as long as you have. I will tell you that none of that would have been possible without the mentoring that I've gotten from you. Because I will tell you, very few people have spent as much time with me, teaching me, showing me how to do that than you have. And so I will tell you, while I'm very proud of what we have done in this bill, all of us as appropriators, it would have not happened without your mentoring and the fact that you have been willing to spend that time in kind of showing me the ropes when others may not have been willing to do that.
I appreciate that very much. That's a good place to end. No, I do appreciate it very much. But now you understand why there could not be a better member of Congress to chair the State and Foreign Ops appropriation bill. It's one of those that doesn't get a lot of attention out there, and oftentimes there are constituents that say, we need to quit spending all that money on foreign aid and that kind of stuff. Well, we're trying to get it back to doing what we should be doing. Right. And I don't think most people are opposed to giving aid to our allies. Yeah. And
even that, we have to make sure that we're getting what we are paying for.
That's right.
Right? And that's so accountability. Can I just throw one last thing about the bill? One of the things that we've never been able to get done before, even when we the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the White House, is, and this is, you might laugh about this, because I was shocked when I heard this. And I was on the subcommittee and I didn't know that it was this bad. So the money that the UN does get, and by the way, I think we need to continue to pursue reducing money for the UN. But the money that they get, do you realize that we have not even been able to get an accounting of that money?
Really?
No, and so, which is crazy, right? We were not able to have auditors there. And this is billions of dollars of taxpayer money. So for the first time ever, we got that in the fiscal year 24 bill. And so now in the fiscal 25 bill, we are adding and building on the reductions that we can get, where we can get reductions, accountability, and yes, as we said at the beginning, look, if you are an ally, a friend of the United States, you're helping our national security efforts and interests, you're gonna like the fiscal year 25 bill. If you're an enemy, if you're an adversary, or you're in cahoots with our adversaries, well, they're not gonna like this.
Yeah. Well, and it emphasizes one other thing to me. The Appropriations Committee is not a committee that just goes out to spend money. Our biggest responsibility is the oversight of how that money is spent, and it's doing what we intend it to do. And so that's one of the reasons, more than anything else, that I like serving on the Appropriations Committee. Although it is pretty nice to be able to decide where the money goes and certain things.
It is. But if you actually look at it, again, even though it's a very small percentage, right?
Yeah.
Chairman Tom Cole, the full committee chairman, often reminds us that when the Republicans controlled everything, we were actually able to freeze with the appropriation bill.
Yeah.
We literally froze, not in Washington talk, in real talk, froze spending, and yet the deficit and the debt for 10 years. And the deficit and the debt continued to balloon. Why? And I don't want to be critical, because the rest of Congress that actually is responsible for most of that mandatory spending, they have not done what we as appropriators do every year.
Yeah.
The oversight that you're talking about, we do zero-based budgeting in the parts that we control, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice if the rest of Congress did the same?
And that's one of the reasons we are doing these videos on the appropriations process. I want to educate the public, or have them have the opportunity to know what exactly we do spend money on the appropriations and what's really driving the national debt. And that's the entitlement programs.
Yeah.
During that 10-year period where we actually froze spending, which is, if somebody would have told me at the start of that, we're going to freeze it for 10 years, I would have said, you're crazy, you can't do that. But revenue went up during that time.
Right.
And the national debt went up.
That's right.
Because of mandatory spending. So we got to get control of that. So that's one of the reasons I started doing these appropriation videos, and thank you for coming over and explaining what state and foreign ops is, and so that the public could see, okay, you want to cut spending, tell me where you want to cut it, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do it responsibly, though.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
I also hear a lot of times, but how about these projects that members of Congress put in through the appropriations process? And I'm reminded, 100% of discretionary spending is allocated, is earmarked.
Yeah.
And the question is this: should Congress have zero say? And should all of that earmarking, all of those decisions, 100% be made by nameless, faceless bureaucrats, deep state bureaucrats?
Yeah.
Or should it be elected officials with transparency and accountability? And that's the key. And call me crazy, but I will vote for transparency, accountability every day over giving 100% of that authorization of those decisions. And they may be nice, but to nameless, faceless, deep state bureaucrats.
Yeah, and it is, I've always said, I know more about my district than anybody in Washington, D.C. does. And if I know of a community that needs a new water system and they don't have the resources to do it, that kind of stuff, I don't want to have to go beg the administration to please come and fund this shit.
That's right.
So it's I think they're important, but as you said, they've got to be transparent, and you've got to be responsible and be held accountable.
Correct.
If I'm asking for things that are just nuts, then my constituents ought to know that.
And they should.
Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway,
Thanks,
thank you for being here today. Talk a little bit about state and foreign ops and the appropriations process. It's great to see you. And as I said, there's not a better person that could chair state and foreign ops in all of Congress than Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate it.